All right, Susan, you were at that hearing yesterday. Bring me inside. Like, what was the feeling in the room?
Oh, it was sort of outrage and frustration on both sides when you have, somebody like AOC uniting with MTG.
It has been 10 days since an assassination attempt on a former president of the United States, regardless of party. There need to be answers.
Do you have a timeline at all from any of the day?
I have a timeline that does not have specifics.
That's shocking. That is absolutely unacceptable. That means you are a failure at your job.
That seldom happens on the Oversight Committee, as you well know. And it was sort of a unified response. And then as you got to the end of the hearing, James Comer and Jamie Raskin joined together and they said, we're issuing a joint letter to you calling on you to resign. I mean, I think there was quite a few members on both sides that called for her to resign. But the real thing that I thought was outrageous is, the lying to the reporters all week, lying to Mike Waltz all week about whether the president or the president's detail in this case asked for additional resources and then didn't get them. And we were told that was a flat out lie. It was, I was told I was very wrong on a different story that I'll bring up later, tweeted directly at me. And
when you say they, you mean the Secret Service tweeted back at you and said you're lying, or their spokesman, or who?
Yeah, their spokesman tweeted at me Sunday night. I had emailed him a list of questions, 6 very detailed questions. And instead of answering my questions in an email or calling me like a normal press secretary would do, a responsible one, he decided he'd go on Twitter and tweet directly at me and say, this is very wrong. And it wasn't in response to that. I'll get to that. It was about the division of labor between the Trump rally and the Jill Biden dinner. I was saying that there was a diversion between the two. I probably should have said a misallocation to begin with, but it was a semantics issue that he's trying to get me on. And then Fox News, picked it up in the morning. And I said, I stand by my sources. And by the way, if you're talking to me on Twitter and not talking to me over email or calling me, you have my number, because I had talked to him just 3 months ago on that story about the Kamala Harris the detailee that had a mental breakdown at Joint Base Andrews. So we had been in regular touch. So he knew how to get a hold of me, and he called me back then. So, there was no reason why he had to do that, but he just decided that was the best, most effective way of trying to shut me down. And he said the same thing to Mike Waltz, Representative Waltz.
So let's kind of just explain to me, when you talk about the allocation of resources with Jill Biden, can you kind of expand on that a minute? I know she was having another event in Pennsylvania, and I think they were actually covering a third event. Like, walk us through like what was happening in Pennsylvania that day and how resources were or were not allocated.
Yes. So you had obviously the Trump rally with 50,000 people, a huge event and an outdoor setting that they had never been to before. They had actually wanted to do it at the airport, and they had used that same airport in 2020 during that campaign. So the Secret Service was used to that venue. They decided that was already taken. Somebody was already, they already had an event scheduled there. So they decided to do it at this farm show venue. And I will get into the problems that they encountered, and they rushed it. It was rushed. And then they had this Jill Biden event that they had to take care of. That was a dinner for the Italian sons and daughters at a casino inside 300 people. So, and then they had a Kamala Harris event in Philadelphia that was a little bit, I heard that wasn't such an impingement, but then they had the NATO summit that same week leading up to this. And then they had, of course, the RNC convention, which, as you probably know, if you were there, it was, law enforcement everywhere, DHS and Secret Service agents and uniformed division officers everywhere.
So can I ask you this? Why, what's wrong? I mean, I don't mean to say it this way, but why wouldn't you just say, hey, here's the reality. We had these 4 things. We were spread thin. That's, hey, you, and I mean, like, that to me is a very Washington answer. Hey, we need more money. We need more resources. We were spread really thin. Think about it. We got the first lady traveling here. We got Trump here. He's at an outdoor thing. We got the RNC coming up. We got this other Kamala Harris thing. It's almost like they were embarrassed to admit it.
Well, I don't know if they have the resources for all of that. What they're doing, Sean, is they're taking from, you might know about this, during the campaign, they draw from different field offices, and they have an acronym for it. It's called CNOS. But what it is temporary agents that serve a shift, like a 21-day shift, I think it is, but they haven't really worked together before, and these are not the regular detailees to President Trump. So there was a lot of what they call shorthand inside the Secret Service calls temps that were on hand at the Trump rally that day. And that was because a lot of the people had been working, his regular detailees had been working 24/7. And so they needed some time off, but a lot of them were allowed to take off that day. In fact, I'm told a handful, and maybe just one, Sean Curran, the lead agent that assigned to Donald Trump, was the only regular agent there at the rally that day. Yeah.
Holy
The rest
smokes.
were temps. Yeah. And then
so the guys around him that are literally covering him, the woman that we saw, the other, those were not part of his regular detail?
only from what I'm told, I'm saying I've told, some people are telling me it's a handful, and some people are telling me it's just one, Sean Curran, the lead agent, the one that asked, by the way, the one that has asked for and requested the additional resources. So he is obviously very committed to the security of Donald Trump, protecting him. But if you want to get into the division of resources between that and the Joe Biden rally, Senator Grassley had some findings from whistleblowers that he gave me on Sunday, and I published that story, and it was very telling because the Trump rally had only 3 post standards. Do you know what those are, right, Sean? So they are put in the interim inside the perimeter at targeted places to provide additional resources to shore up vulnerability spots. And they're not the regular detail that would go surround Trump if there was a threat. They're actually posted to certain spots at the venue. And then Jill Biden, guess how many she had? 12. 12. Now that's just one sign. We don't know the breakdown of all the resources, and because Grassley has asked for that from the Secret Service twice this week in different letters, and he has not received a response. He wants a breakdown of all the resources now that we know that the post standards were not evenly distributed.
You know, I said this at the outset. I mean, you've covered a lot of stuff over your time as a journalist. Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen a situation, because I cannot recall one, where an incident of this kind of magnitude, and frankly, not even this, a shooting, a natural disaster, a major security event, you name it, where there haven't been regular briefings to the media?
I always think of like the Columbia, explosion, something that significant to our national interest, and people are nervous and rattled by it. And you need to put out information so that there's not, all these conspiracy theories going on out there, because that's the nature of it's human nature. Just think, well, what if, I didn't see it with my own eyes. I'm not getting my questions answered. And in this case, we are finding things out, in dribs and drabs. And just in the last 24 hours, we found out that that Thomas Crooks had a cell phone, and he had pictures of a Michigan school shooter on it, and he had encrypted apps that were located in different countries. And I don't think that's too rare, but it starts leading to questions, logical questions that people may have, like, well, is there a foreign agent involved in this?
I tell you, Susan, I know that sounds wacky, but I watch enough of this, crime television. I love the Jack Carr novels and the Vince Flynn books and all this kind of stuff. And tell me, I mean, this is how crazy this sounds, but it sounds like you've got Iran issuing a threat saying we're going to kill it. And then this kid out of nowhere, who's not a great shot, he gets kicked off the rifle team, has no social media footprint, but they're starting to find these encrypted things here and there. And I'm going, is it that nuts to think that somehow they get to this kid, they compromise him, and they say, hey, here's the deal. You're going to do this, or we go after your family, or do something like that? I mean, I don't know, but this is, to your point, in lieu of a vacuum of information, I read all this stuff on the internet and I'm like, I don't know, maybe that isn't that crazy because no one's telling me it's not. No one's giving the answers. And let's go back to this hearing for a second. I watched some of it. I saw a lot of the clips from it. I felt like you finally come forward. Let me start. I want to play you. I thought there's actually a great clip of Congressman Moskowitz, who is a Democrat. And I want to play this clip for you. I'm sure you see it, but I want the viewers to understand this is how a Democrat teed up the hearing to her. Let's play the clip.
Director, I just want to give you an honest assessment of how this is going for you today. Did you happen to catch the hearing many months ago in education where there were a bunch of university presidents and Elise Stefanik asked a very easy question and couldn't get an answer? Did you see that hearing?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, well, let me tell you, it didn't go well, and the short end of that story was those university professors all resigned. They're gone. That's how this is going for you. This is where this is headed, okay? I don't know who prepared you for this. I don't know how many times you've testified in front of Congress, but a president was almost assassinated live on television, not just for Americans, but for the world to see. And this being your first opportunity, I understand there's an ongoing investigation. I understand there's things that you can not talk about. But the idea that we're getting less than you did on television is something that Democrats, Independents, or Republicans are going to find unacceptable.
That, to me, set the table perfectly, right? No one's talked to the American people. She finally agrees under subpoena to testify. Did you learn anything yesterday, Susan Crabtree?
Here's what I learned. There was pieces of information she provided. Like she said at one point that she believed it was a lone shooter. Well, that was reassuring because there was all this.
But believed, right? Is that the word that you just said? She believed it was. That doesn't inspire confidence, does it?
It wasn't completely definitively, but she said, she was getting this information from the FBI. But she couldn't share all the information she got from the FBI. But here's what I think happened. And I think I sort of garnered this information, and I went and talked to Benny Thompson last night at the votes, and he's, the ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee. And of course, he has a troubled history here of trying to take away the Secret Service, or at least doing a symbolic measure, writing a legislation that would take away the Secret Service from Donald Trump if he had a felony. That never win anything in the Republican Congress. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is she did talk about this lack of communication between why did it take so long for the Secret Service sniper. It was a Secret Service sniper. At first, we didn't know if it was the law enforcement sniper, if it was a Secret Service sniper. There were two teams that equaling two teams of two in the Secret Service, and there was one law enforcement team of two snipers. The Secret Service took out the sniper. But why did it take so long, right? And why did he shoot after the president was already shot, basically grazed, and another person died? I mean, it's just terrible that it took that much. Well, what I'm hearing and what I'm coming to grips with is that the law enforcement, they were not on the same radio frequency. Because at first I was told, well, there's a radio frequency. They call back to this command center, and there's the Secret Service people making decisions. Maybe it's back at the field office in Pittsburgh, but there's senior people making these decisions. They call back, they see a suspicious person, but that's not what happened. For an hour beforehand, the law enforcement, almost an hour, the law enforcement knew about it, but the Secret Service didn't. And if you look at Senator Ron Johnson's initial report that he put out on Sunday that I got a hold of, I think first I did, and I put it on my Twitter. He lays this out. He uses the word siloed. They were siloed from each other. And Kimberly Cheadle, before that had come out, and Kimberly Cheadle sat there yesterday and told us that they have a protocol, they have a policy of making sure law enforcement and Secret Service are in that command center together, local law enforcement, a representative, so that there's constant communication, so that they're not siloed. And then I think she called it interoperability. Okay.
Yes.
That was the term she used. Well, then I went and talked to Benny Thompson. It was interesting to me what he said. He was at Butler. He went to Butler with the Homeland Security Committee yesterday or the day before. And what he took away from that is the local law enforcement weren't in the command center. So they weren't talking to each other very well.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.